welcome to season 2 of the Mosaic Ark. Yes, I can't believe it. We made it a whole year, and wow, what a journey it's been. Thank you all so much who have sailed with us from August to August. We are embarking now on a new year and a new series of stories, and we have no idea where we're going. So we start I think we knew a little bit at the beginning of last year the kinds of things that we wanted to talk about, because we need to lay some ground for thinking about Christ and history and the way we think about empire and nation. And we knew we wanted to talk about art. And I'm pretty proud of us, right? That we made it all the way around the sun to the point where hopefully we can now start building on our understanding and thinking about things that recognizing that, of course, we are different from every other live stream on the internet because we actually go somewhere rather than continually reiterating the same internet drama over and over and over again and doing, okay, I get it, right? I get why people like basically the but is it the wrestling WWE, right? Where you go, I'm going to have this guy on and we're going to fight about that guy and I'm going to smash talk that. We will maybe we should learn from the boys just a little bit. But on the way, we're going to tell you stories, and we're going to seek to unpack the mysteries and symbolism and resonances that are out there playing along all of the lines of the internet and that are affecting us all in our lives. So we're really grateful that everyone stuck with us for the whole year, and we are launching tonight on our second season, mainly because I realized that if the way I was setting up the episode guide on the website was going to crash if I kept listing so many, so we have to do another set. Basically, that's how many we've done. So welcome. Tonight we have a special story to talk about, and I realized we've done all these episodes talking about the story that we're writing now, but we actually haven't told you that much about the story we've already written. So tonight's story time. Welcome to the Mosaic Ark. How are you, my dear? We made it a whole year. Can you believe it?
Yeah, we did. A whole year sailing together in a digital ark.
You remember how this time last year, literally this time last year, we didn't have our set yet because I had to learn OBS to be able to design this whole thing. I hope you guys are impressed at how techie we are and how beautifully we've carried on through so many different locations. Promising that we will stream from our mother's basement on a regular basis, one way or another.
Yes. There's been no location too distant or subterranean. It's been great.
Well, I do have some plans. There are going to be some more Mother's Basement episodes in the near future since it's summer and we need to take our summer holiday. I think we should. Patrick told us when he was on for our marathon that we should dream big, right? Although I'm not sure was that in the after party or in the live stream? I don't care. Anyway, we should dream big.
After 6 hours, it was all just one.
Who knows?
One long rave.
Who knows? We do have offers from Patrick. Yeah, Patrick, you're coming back on. I don't think we're gonna do regular guests because I don't. I you know why would we want regular guests? If you want to be a guest on the Mosaic Ark, it's got to be very special. You're gonna have to like audition for us and give us something useful that we can pick your brains on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, just coming in our boudoir and thinking that we'll entertain you without money.
Yeah. Well, we got honest really quick, didn't we?
Well, I want to set the parameters for the new year. I mean, you know, we've gone we have gone such dangerous places that I think some people are terrified to talk to us now.
Oh, I think some people definitely must be very scared to talk to us.
What are they going to bring up next? It might be like aesthetics or something.
Oh no, we might have negative opinions on somebody else's work.
We might use big words.
Might use the wrong words. The naughty words on the banned list.
Well, we're artists. We're supposed to, right? So I'm in the middle of reading this Henry Hitchens book, which I've still forgotten what the title is, The Secret Life of Words or something like that, right? It's like English, and I've talked about this, or in some of our episodes where we talked about English and poetry. I still love English. I did pirate language. It's because it really has gone around the world scooping up everybody else's vocabulary. Yeah. That we have famously such a rich vocabulary because we steal everybody else's words. Although most of the time when Hitchens is talking about like foreign words and how they become English, I'm like, those are still foreign words. It's occasionally they're ones that I think we've naturalized to the point where we recognize they're not. We can't recognize anymore that they're alien, foreign, plundered. But most of the time English wears its plunder pretty boldly. Mm-hmm. Straight up.
They're proudly flashing their stolen wares.
Their blood diamonds, their scepters that they use in their coronations that they've stolen, their rocks from around the world. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, well, I've been hammering that theme this week quite a lot about the mines in South Africa.
Yeah.
Because you know, we're global south here, so we have a different experience of civilization down in the global south. Being that we're glorified mining towns in many ways, and all of our countries down here have been carved out of a relationship with mining and going into the earth to dig it out.
Mm-hmm.
And dig precious little rocks out of the ground for people that want those precious little rocks dug out of the ground. So yeah,
we are still promising to do a proper Snow White episode, clearly, right? If we're going to talk about mining rocks, beautiful rocks.
Yes.
Hi ho, hi ho. I say we did talk about Deadwood. We did talk about Deadwood back some time ago.
We've mentioned
right?
Deadwood.
You know, and that's a mining boomtown. Certainly, the American West, like Australia, is mining and boomtown, and we definitely, yes. So here, this is the part of the show where we project all of the things we forgot we did, and we'll do again. We do a proper episode on Depp's Tonto, and the Constitution, and the silver. Yes. You didn't have the bird,
I
tried
I tried to do the Tonto makeup, but I didn't have enough white.
So we remind you guys, we're thematic and we come back to themes, and we are very capable of kind of remembering what we talked about previously. But for those of you who have not actually seen absolutely every episode, maybe reincorporation will help, and go back and look at there was a fuller treatment of this in the previous season somewhere back in the blurbs, we promise, probably. Yeah.
The mining thing, so that the Tonto Wild West boomtown. I was talking to a friend of mine last night, and she's Italian, and she was saying, we're sitting there, we're speaking wog to wog, so we can be a little bit honest. We're being cheeky. We're sitting there. She says, "There's something wrong here. I get off the plane every time I return to this country, and I feel like I'm in an aesthetic environment. It's sterilized." I said, "Yeah, but you know why they sterilize the place, right?" And she said, "No, I just don't understand it, because they have time off. It's like they can't enjoy life. They just stop working." I said, "Yeah, it's because we got rid of all the Irish." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Do you notice here that there are no Irish communities anymore anywhere?" She goes, "I didn't even know there were Irish communities here in the beginning." Gone, whoosh. So I said, this is the mining town without the Irish playing in it. She said, okay, that makes sense. So yeah, we're analyzing what was going on here, and I said the culture's gone into a boom or bust kind of phase, where we're getting tons and tons of people migrating into it. Why they're migrating? Because of economic reasons. They're not migrating to a culture. So we're running on mining dynamics constantly. It's just that people aren't going into holes now. They're going into financial sector. They're going to corporate mines. So we're all playing Minecraft down here in the global south, and it's yeah.
That is so interesting. So I was in Phoenix back in a few weeks ago because of Summer Nationals for fencing, back competing in the fencing, and there was a pasty shop, right? Like Cornish pasties filled.
Pasties,
whatever they are, and it was interesting because there was pictures of mining all over the restaurant.
Yeah.
And when I came back, I was like, my husband saying, so we went to this pasty shop, and he's like, "Oh yeah, it must have been a lot of Welsh there." It's because Phoenix, they were mines. So those were the only things that were open. It was like super hot. Phoenix is in the middle of a massive heat wave for 2 weeks or so. We were there in part of it, the beginning of this 115-degree weather, and the only things were open because it was around 4th of July were these 2 Irish pubs. So I like chicken pot pie one night
in Arizona.
Yeah, and then Cornish pasties, right? And in a restaurant surrounded by pictures of guys in coal mines and kids and things like that. And my husband, who's English, was like, "Yeah, there's a lot of mining down there," and I'm like, "Aha." Yeah.
They used to cook them. They used to cook them with half savory, and then the other half it was a sweet. And they had that big piece of crust on the outside because the boys in the mines would have dirty hands. They couldn't wash them when they're on the job.
Right.
So they'd hold the big thick crust, eat it. They'd have their savory, their sweet, and then they'd throw the crust on the ground. It's really cool.
Well, these crusts were actually quite tasty. But yes, it's like that's all you got in the meal, right? Was the thing, the filled crust, right? Yeah. Working miners' food.
A real symbol of toil.
Yeah.
The pasty. Yeah. There's a lot of pasties in Australia. You can go to any bakery in Australia and you can get a pasty.
Well, there's the hidden mining. It's the hidden mines in all of those pasties.
Yeah. I don't think people know the history of them. They're just eating them, and they eat the crust now because, of course, their hands aren't dirty.
Yeah. Well, so this is, I think we clearly need to keep doing some more history. This is one of the things that we're talking about, where we're getting into Act 2 in Draco Alchemicus, and our characters are going to be telling fairy stories about spice. But the spices are, of course, various and mythical in the proper Draco Alchemican sense, and this mythology of the earth. That's one of the things we're starting with, right? The iron mining and metallurgy, and the transformations that humanity has put rocks through in order to end up with skyscrapers. And I spent a lot of last year thinking about, or the year before, I forgot. I don't even know which time zone we're on anymore. Glass, right? Which we have talked about, that glass is molten rock.
Yeah.
And the way we are transforming the earth into our cities and our technologies and our communications and our gems.
Mm-hmm.
This is, just so y'all know, this is all actually topical to the story that we're going to talk about tonight too, because it's got some rocks in it.
Yeah, we got a lot of shiny rocks.
Shiny rocks. Well, this has been one of our continuing themes, right? I think, and we talked about this in our first episode our very first episode last season. The story. I guess we did talk about Aurora Borealis last summer, because we talked some about the rock, the in the darkest earth the great light shines, right?
Yes.
And that transformation of coal into diamond is one of the mysteries that we were meditating on in telling the story about the bears.
Yeah. We had an overview of one of the riddles. That particular riddle is like a key piece of the story, because in this little fairy tale that we've created, of course, the bears are leaving the northern hemisphere to find this the southern aurora. So the story is about the search for light.
Mm-hmm.
We start our story with the beginning the beginning of the search for the light of the world. And of course, because gems are refracting light and they do things to the light, we wanted to incorporate a lot of them in the story. And again, point to where in the scriptures the Israelites were also meditating on the role of gemstones in the imagination of Israel.
Right.
So,
we got a super chat from Yan ZG saying happy anniversary. Thank you. Yes, Casey going happy 1 year anniversary, Mel. I can't believe it's been a whole year. I know. Anniversaries are interesting for me that way, because sometimes like suddenly a year is a long time, but then with the anniversary it seems like that collapses. It's like now it's a count, right? It's like you've done one.
Yeah.
But that a year is in fact a very long time. Lots can happen in a year. You can end up with a baby in a year.
Yeah.
A whole new life. Yeah. I want, before we go on the story, I wanted to get you to talk a little bit more about why you've been thinking about the southern mining and put that in context. Because as
sure,
you were saying that, I was also thinking of how, so the world has changed so much in a year, and not at all. Where politically now, I mean, some of the things we talked about last year with the Anglo nationalism has become even more apparent. The degree to which the American empire needs to reconfigure its self-perception. Because it is certainly not going to get to be the monopole of, world good guys anymore, basically. I mean, that particular mythology has, I think, crashed and is careening around the universe right now. But that mining and spice are so critical to what we're watching play out right now.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I've been thinking and talking about this because of the video that was posted by the EFF party in South Africa. Malema.
What's the EFF? I don't know what that is.
It's a far left wing, like basically Marxist Revolutionary Party in South Africa. It's an offshoot of the ANC, and they just went further left. And
the ANC is the one that's been. So you may be a little more familiar with this than all of us Northern Hemisphere.
Sorry, yeah. I'll stop using the acronyms,
please.
All right. So apartheid collapses, the ANC gets into power, African National Congress, and that's sort of like the anti-apartheid, progressive party of South Africa. And then they have their youth wing of the party, so it's very much like National Socialists in Germany in that sense. Then they've got lots of different factions and whatever that are inside it. this guy who was in the video, he comes from ANC party, but he started his own thing, EFF, which is even further left. And basically, everybody in the north or in the Anglosphere or the west or whatever has looked at this video and said, oh my God, this is horrific. It's like a race war. Yeah, obviously, but South Africa is a race war. So me and my own gadfly way, I just sort of thought, hold on, this is yet another opportunity to look at the mess that was made down there, because I don't like South Africa. I love Africa. So again, it's like a contrast thing to sort of say, okay, why I can say that, but that country is a really complicated gulag of race wars that was created around the avaricious lust for the things that were in the ground in South Africa. And the Australian story is a part of that, because South Africa is essentially a turf war between the Dutch and the English, and then Bantu people that came down from further north of South Africa. But this whole situation with colonial South Africa is that it's an Anglo-Dutch turf war. And Australia got involved in this in the Second Boer War. People don't talk about it a lot. My family do, because we have a memory of being involved in the Boer War. What I found really interesting was that the right-wing pundits, commentaries, all the right-wingers on the internet are saying, oh, this is so horrible, we need to import all of these poor Boers and all the Afrikaans people, whatever the Afrikaners. And I was thinking, hold on a second, you guys don't understand how this mess was made at all. You don't understand anything about South Africa and why these Boers are being shot on their farms, and why all these crimes are happening, and why this far-left EFF party is doing what it's doing in public. There are dynamics here that people aren't looking at. So I was thinking, okay, let me kind of revive the memory of Australia's involvement in the Second Boer War. So this is going to hurt Australians. It's going to hurt a lot of people that are in America, possibly, that are, Team America, where we're the good guys. We have the moral upper hand here with the democratic people. Australia is a colony. It still runs on colonial mechanics, as I was describing last night with my Italian friend who understands this as well. And the Australian nation was not a nation until the middle of the Second Boer War. So at the time, Australia was colonies, just a collection of British colonies, and each colony had its own standing military, and each colony sent military over to South Africa to help the English destroy the Boers so that the English could get monopoly over the diamond and gold mines.
And let's say this bluntly, if you saw a Boer, what color would you think they were?
Most of the people that are talking about these political issues would consider the Boers white. So Australia's colonial history,
they're Dutch,
is
right?
Yeah, they're Dutch. They're Dutch. They're a mixture of Dutch and French Huguenots that came down from France. The French Protestants, French Catholics tried to convert them to bring them back into French nationality. They refused. So they said, bye, we're going. They went back, all the way really far away from France. And then they arrived in South Africa and they were assimilated into the Dutch community there. So the Boers are a mixture of these French Huguenots and the Dutch settlers that got there into South Africa. Well, of course, you think about who were these Dutch settlers, very similar to people that settled the Australian continent.
Or New Amsterdam, maybe.
New Amsterdam.
So some of this I've learned from you in the last few days, but when are these Boer settlements? Because New Amsterdam is 1640s, 1660s. Before, in
that time.
In the course of these Anglo-Dutch wars in the 17th century, one of the things that happens is the English managed to get New Amsterdam in exchange for a nutmeg island.
Yeah. Malakas.
Yeah. So, the New York is allegedly English. It's on top of that New Amsterdam settlement, and it's an aspect of this whole 17th century jockeying for control of these sea routes. But the Boer War is
Yes.
happening in the early 20th century, so it's a carry on from this competition. Yeah.
Yes. Because the English and the Boers, they didn't consider themselves the same people.
Right.
You know, in the way back time machine of colonialism in Africa, they didn't look at each other and think, "Oh, we're the same. We're both whites." They considered each other mortal enemies. There was 2 wars between them,
Right.
and the Boers had settled in this area called the Transvaal, and they were kind of left alone for the most part for a little while, until the English realized that the area that they'd settled, the Boers, that is, the Boers were farming and living on top of enormous gold and diamond deposits. So that kicks off the military conflict. The Empire, the British Empire, that is, calls for reinforcements. So the interesting thing about the Second Boer War is that the colonial army, you know, the British army, the biggest infantry stock that they get is from down in Australia. Why that is? Because we were renowned as horsemen. We had the experience of living in the bush, because obviously Australia is even more bushy than like South Africa. We are less developed than South Africa. So our men were tough enough to survive African conditions, thrive in them, participate in guerrilla warfare in African conditions, bring our horses, and also had absolutely no qualms about shooting Boers. None. In fact, they were participating in setting up concentration camps and starving their women and children so that they had to surrender to the English. And
people, I mean, so Bugbear says happy 1 year as well.
Hello.
That you know, people often know that tidbit that the British invent the concentration camps, but they invent them in this context.
It's in this conflict. Yeah. It's in this context.
This was the beginning of guerrilla. To move the Boers off of their lands so as to mine.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a deliberate policy of ethnic displacement. Right. They had to move an entire ethnic group off their land in order to mine, and the Boers didn't want to leave, obviously, because that was their home. I mean, their ethnic identity is very complicated. I had a great comment on the Sandwich Press because someone said, you know, you can't call Boers white in the Atlanticist, new West Americanized racial categories, because the race categories down there are different again, and the Boers have this thing called Boer exceptionalism. So, you know, it's like they consider themselves white in South Africa now, but in terms of like Europeans, there's nothing European about them almost. They've become their own like thing. But the Australians were involved in that, setting up the concentration camps. And at this time, they were not Australians. Australian was a kind of nickname for them. They were still the colonial subjects of the British Empire that lived in this continent. In the middle of the Boer War, in the middle of this conflict, Australia federated and declared itself an independent nation. And this was also to do with mining interests. It was mining interests which provoked the Australian colonies to federate in order to make it easier for the mining enterprises here to function. The New Zealanders decided that they didn't want to become a part of that federation, and they went off and did their own thing, which is why New Zealand isn't an official state of Australia, although there is provision in the Constitution for New Zealand to join us if they want to. But there's a lot going on down here in the south that you guys aren't aware of, and usually it's got something to do with what's in the grounds and who wants control of what's in the grounds. And a lot of the racial issues that people are dealing with in South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand have something to do with the dynamics of the mining boom phenomenon that was going on around that era. So, yeah, that's been my focus this week, because, of course, everyone said, oh, it's horrible, you know, it's a genocide. But I said, okay, hold on a second. Do you guys not realize that Australia was involved in the exact same behavior not that long ago? Yeah. And everyone's forgotten about it, you know. People here don't talk about it. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's you know, yet another demonstration of what we've been trying to talk talk with people about, saying that these racial categories are politicized for particular reasons. That
Yes.
they, you know, the sort of even the naturalizing it. One of the so this secret life of words that I'm reading, I'm in the chapter on the 20th century, so I read the one on the 19th century, and all of these categories that are developed during the Industrial Revolution in order to make scientific, right? You said he was Marxist, the leader of this EFF group, right? That
Yes.
Marxism's main claim is to be scientific. And so all they do, right? It's like when I teach the ABC of communism,
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I show in the Soviet 1919 handbook, right, for the party. And it's like they're always saying, here's the literature that you need to read, and here's like the textbook for the party. And we have the science on our side, which is of course making Marx into this Moses-like prophet of historical, you know, realization. So there's that. And that all, you know, the racialisms that we're, you know, allegedly dealing with that are durable and quote real, are real in the sense of 19th century science, which is mythologizing to create these political justifications over and over and over again.
Yes. Well, it's an interesting thing, because we had a lot of Aboriginal people in that conflict that were passing to join. Again, something people here don't want to talk about very much.
Yeah.
But that was very common in our military. We had a lot of native men that were passing in order to fight in the wars, to fight for empire. And a lot of them got stuck in South Africa. There were a few that got stuck there because the colonial government said, oh, well, you're not allowed back in because we've got White Australia policy now.
Oh,
hold on a second. We just fought for you. We just fought with you. We just killed a bunch of Boers. We can't come back into our own country. No. They closed the gates. And again, it's the categories that get, you know, the scientific categories that got propped up to make that policy. They didn't care 30 years prior, 20 years prior. It was like, no, from this date, you don't count. You got to make your own way home. So yeah, I mean, it's funny that the more I look at the history of this place, the dynamics of the British colonial projects, it's very Marxist. It's just that people don't look at it in the same way because, of course, it's not done in a Soviet sort of approach. They're not speaking Russian, you know. They look different, so they can't be the same thing. Surely, you know, that's different. That's British colonialism. But yeah, trust the science was the name of the game down here. It really was. We know the science of ethnicity, and we know the science of nation building. Yeah.
Right. So how are we going to get out of this horrible place?
Mining.
Modernity's storytelling. Oh, I guess we need better stories.
We do need better stories.
And some, I mean, it's so fascinating. I mean, obviously, the more we study this, and the more we've been our social media constantly starts feeding into these streams, because there's like, these are the things that people are clearly wrestling with, right? And I'm getting, you know, I've one attentive young man on Twitter right now, or X, as Mr. South Africa is calling it, insisting without having watched our episode from last week that we wanted to say what all women want. And I'm like, I didn't use the word all in the title. I just said what women really want. And he's like, you're a bigot and a narcissist because you claim to know what everybody wants. All these women want, all the women I know want to be individuals. And I'm like, you do know who, you know, originally made that argument? Yes. And this becomes funnier because in his compound name to, you know, declare his independence from all MAGA people it's a portmanteau of various authors. But the first one is Sartre, as in Jean-Paul, I'm assuming, who was the philosophical and physical lover of Simone de Beauvoir for 51 years, as they never got married, you know, traded all of their philosophical writings. We, of course, talked about Simone de Beauvoir in our first episode on What Women Really Want, and read what she said. And guess what? And that's the conclusion she came to after 800 pages, is women want to be individuals. And Mr. Sartre online is telling me, you don't know what women want. And I'm like, well, you don't know what Simone de Beauvoir actually said, because that's exactly what she said. And that, you know, he seems to have missed the part where Sartre kept taking Simone de Beauvoir's young female lovers away from her. Wait. And I'm sitting there in this rather, you know, unpleasant Twitter exchange thinking, how do people making the very arguments that de Beauvoir made about women all want to be individuals and not have any ties or, you know, relationships, except for she had this very permanent relationship with Sartre, which was never formalized permanently, but was in fact the one that you know, it's like, how do we end up in the story,
the world's longest situationship?
the storytelling where people have no clue that they're caught in these stories. I mean, at one point this young man on the Twitter was saying, what does something written in 1940s have to do with 2023? And I'm like, well, we're still in that one. And the one you got caught up in the, I think it was in the diner, it could have been in my chat, where this guy's telling you how evolution is real.
Oh yeah, because I was hammering Darwinism.
I mean, there's a whole region in Australia called Darwin, right? There's a town. It's a
territory. Yeah, sorry, the capital city of a territory.
Right.
Northern Territory.
Why would that be? Why would all of a whole territory in Australia be called Darwin? Talk about mythologizing.
it amazes me. I mean, yeah, talk about mythologizing. I mean, we've got a region called the Kimberley. There's a region in South Africa called the Kimberley. We've got we've got Darwin up there, but we've got a bunch of place names that are shared with that other mining country.
Interesting.
But it's like, the reason why I was hammering Darwinism is I was trying to say to everybody, you're complaining about the modern world. This is literally, modernity is like, thank you, Charles Darwin, you've created this civilization for us. And everyone's, you know, well, not very happy with me saying this, because they want to hang on to their little theory of natural selection as the origin of species. And the favorable races, of course, that other part of his theory is is the implications of what this means for the human race. You know, we're talking about the favorable races. Well, This is like, again, you import your colonial project. What kind of civilization do you want to be colonized by? Why are people angry with this particular civilization that's collapsing, the British colonial system? Why are they angry with it? Why do they hate this imposition so much? Because I don't think anyone would have been complaining had the Italians taken over. And it's, well, to be fair,
Ethiopia fought pretty hard to keep them out.
Oh yeah, then yeah. You know, in the Wayback Machine.
Well, but, I don't know. I mean, no, the problem is the Romans, right? Which is why Mussolini tried to take over Ethiopia. Shall we? You know, like the persistent story. We will remind everybody is nobody gets to be the good guys in this story.
No.
We're all fallen.
No, but it was this thing that I was trying to explain. You've introduced these categories that are smacking up against a traditional culture that is being given this way of thinking. I was, and I've tried to explain this to people before, like, New Zealanders and Australians have a really complicated thing to figure out right now, because we all had to play along with Darwinism, the culture, for a long time, and we trashed our tribal connections. And so everyone's working that out as we speak. But like, natural selection was applied to the human experience, and it's very difficult for everyone to grapple with that, because they say, oh, no, we need Darwinism for the evolutionary theory, for the science, but we're going to ignore it, and we're going to ignore its all of the profound implications it can have on human society when people think that it really is a race for the most fit, you know, and then the unfit are disqualified from the genetic pool. It's like, I don't know how people are so in denial of the natural consequence of accepting this philosophy is that you're going to create a natural selection culture. That's just what has happened. So,
well, for the West, it's the culture of abortion, which was straight up. But I mean, what the other thing I was thinking of though is there's a C.S. Lewis did a nice little meditation in the 1940s on how evolution is itself a myth, right? And this doesn't have to go with the mathematical modeling that Vox has talked about, which I'm persuaded he's right. I never thought about it in those terms. Oh, right, the math doesn't work. You can't fix species in the time frame that these mutations are supposedly taking place, and you've never seen one actually fix in a new species, even in fruit flies. So guess what? It doesn't work mathematically or demonstrably. But Lewis was talking about it as it fits with, I mean, this sort of, it's a creation myth, but that doesn't have a creator, and things just happen. And that this fit in, and he was able to critique it in the 40s and saying this fits with this model of who we think we are as a society, that it's going to be progressive, and everything's going to be continually getting better, and it's a sort of capitalist model of production, that you're saying is so the competition between the different companies is going to always eventuate in a stronger company, and that all of that was it's just as much mythological in its truth character as any other creation myth. It's not a scientific, I mean, it's scientific, but science itself is a myth in those terms. I mean, yes, I agree with that too. I mean, science is for the most part philosophizing about what we can observe, and the degree to which you can make technological solutions of things. Yes, those work. Whether those are magic or not, we probably have to. Maybe these are good projections on where we're going to have to talk about this things for the next year: science and technology and magic, and continuing on those themes. But that it's the evolution as it functions, both scientifically and historically, is a myth.
Yes,
with like a capital M myth.
Yeah. It's the origin myth of modernity, really.
Right.
I mean, it's the origin myth of the British system,
precisely,
that we've lived under here. And so, like, in terms of the story itself, the origin myth of this civilization, it's it's based on
power,
competition, power. Yeah. Power. It is. Yeah. And of course, power is real. It's part of human experience, but as a myth for a culture, I mean,
I think what I'd like to do with that thought is read the C.S. Lewis piece and talk about it. Maybe we do that next. Let's
do that next.
Let's read a different story now, right? So FR says, I have a scientific book from the 1920s. Australian professor ranking the races from high to low. Yeah. No, that's standard stuff. We have in the Field Museum in Chicago, there's a series of sculptures that create difficult problems for the curators and conservators constantly, because nobody wants them right now, but they were done to show the races of mankind back in the 20s and 30s. I mean, that this sort of ranking of races was a big deal in the period. So
yeah.
But that's not what we wanted. Let's shift to a solution. These are the problems. Okay, so actually this is good, because like last year we started with the grammar of the internet and how are we going to talk about poetry and structure and everything. And I would say yes, we're still talking about stories, and we're talking about how do we now craft our way imaginatively into a better. Well, I'd say it's a appreciation experience. I have another book. DCR books are the publishing part of our enterprise. Is bringing out another book in a week or so. It's in press right now in proofs. on writing Christian poetry that I did an introduction for, and I think we maybe want to talk about that too when it's available. But the volume is poems that 7 of my students at the University of Chicago wrote in a class that I taught a year and a half ago on writing Christian poetry. And as I was writing the introduction, I finally sort of had been, took a while to edit the poems and get them ready and such like that. And I would get the introduction. I was like, what was I doing in that class? What are we doing in the Dragon Common Room? What are we doing in writing our poetry? And it's saying, this is Christianity needs poetry. It's not just ornament or pretty stuff or, recherche art form and something like that. It's like the heartbeat of our faith is in poetry. And getting to the point where we're saying we can complain a lot. We can say that these historical trends are happening. People are misunderstanding the way in which they're caught up in previous mythologizings and like when we were describing with the Boers and the English. And so being, sympathetic for the whites that are down there in South Africa now, which, yes, it's fine to be sympathetic, but recognize, we were on the bad guy side in some of this at some points. And we need to understand our place in these stories, and we need to understand the power that the stories that we tell can have for giving shape to our souls.
Yes.
So we're writing really good stories in the Dragon Common Room that will take on this challenge directly. And the one that we wanted to share with you tonight is the bear story that we wrote for children. We have, for those of you following us in our newsletter, we are going to start hopefully making some kind of lesson plans and activities and brainstorming ways in which you can use this story in your own story time with your children, in classes, in classical Christian education. We have high hopes for our art, right? It's like the aim, the long-term aim is, let's see, get this to Mel Gibson and make an animated movie. We'll just say that out in the internet and say, yes, we want this animated as a full-scale theater release. Is that big enough of a dream?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, good. Let's dream with the bears, right? Okay. So we've had a number.
It would be appropriate for a story about searching for the light to eventually be generated in light.
Yes. I mean, so we have things on the. Excuse me. Sorry, I got too excited there. We have things on the website in our merch, which when I made, I put them together, took at the art and added them to objects that you can get through Zazzle. And we've talked about these before. We're always trying to match our art to its appropriate medium, right? And therefore having the puzzle that the characters solved by the end of our story, and this one made into a puzzle, which is a lovely 1,054 piece color poster size puzzle. We're working on making some smaller piece count ones for kids, recognizing that not everybody has the capacity to do 1,054 piece puzzle that's actually moderately challenging. My brother enjoyed doing it with me. He can do puzzles, with no pictures on them and stuff like that. So, your mileage may vary. That it would be delightful to have this story about the light cast in the light that we are trying to transform by participating in it, right? It's like, as McLuhan taught us, and that we've been talking about all year, railing against the technology isn't going to transform it. Christ became incarnate into our world with our language, with the word, with our technology of communication. We have to transform our experience of being incarnate by way of participating in the story, not by, we run away from it, but that's a different moment.
Sorry, I'm foiled by the technology of my eye makeup.
Oh,
today.
yes. Okay.
This Enochian tech, it gets you. So yeah, we're using this tech now in the same way that the Christian church decided to use the existing technology of the time of the apostles. We're meditating about the metallurgy a couple of days ago, and I think this is probably a good place to start with our stories, that we wanted to show Christ in the world, and the revelation of his light in the story of these little bears going to search for it, and how the artifact of the creatures, of the characters in the story, also reveals him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that was probably a good way to start. We specifically put our bears into a boat for a reason. You know, we wanted them fishing in the beginning of the story, so they're sitting there in the fjord, and they're fishing with their lines, and they have their net, and they have the boat. So we're, you know, integrating all of these. I mean, they're human technologies, but they also become a part of the gospel when Christ enters into the human story, and himself is on a boat, and he's spending time with fishermen, and, you know, these kinds of things. So
I think perhaps so there is a video of me reading Act 1 to the kids at St. John Cantius in Chicago, and we are convinced that this demonstrates that this story is very kid friendly, because by the end of it they were swarming my chair. Right? So there's that.
Yes.
But there's also, and when I read it to them, I did unpack some of the things, but I was trying to actually just read it to them and sort of get some responses. That I think maybe what we should do, I was thinking we could make this a regular part of a regular sort of element of our sequence, that the poem's 100 stanzas. We could read a little bit each week, or we could come back to it, or something like that. But anyway, it took us, I think, 6 or 7 months to write this one. It's Draco Chemicus is much slower going, because we're crafting at a higher level of precision than we knew we could when we wrote Aurora Borealis. But also this is for kids, and so it's somewhat lighter than Draco Chemicus. But if we read a little bit, if I read a little bit, and then we just talk about what's in the stanzas, to show people what it's like to try to say we're crafting Christ into these stories, and we're really crafting them at a level that your children should be able to enjoy them, but that the more you read them, the more they reveal to you. Yes. Okay. Well, so we have on screen the opening 2 stanzas, and I'll start there. Oh, the book actually does have an epigraph, which is helpful to use if you're worried. This is definitely a Christian story, and we say so in the epigraph. For God, who commanded the light to shine out of darkness, hath shined in our hearts, to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. 2 Corinthians 4:6. And that is actually the point of the story, right? It's the light shining out of darkness to shine in our hearts, to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in our recognition of Christ, in the face of Jesus Christ. And that in the scriptures, it's like when Moses goes up on the mountain and is face to face with God, his face shines. This shining of the face that shines. I mean, obviously, when Jesus is transfigured on the mountain, which is this Sunday, in the Feast of the Transfiguration, he shines with that heavenly light. You see the apostles that are with him, Peter, James, and John, see him transfigured and transformed. But seeing the face of Christ, seeing the face of our Lord, is our longing and our desire. So in that sense, this Aurora Borealis is intended as a mystical meditation, right? That we're longing for that light in the face of Jesus Christ. For bears. For little bears. Okay, so we have Act 1, the net. And I'll read the stanza and then we'll talk about it, and then we'll read another one and we'll talk about it and just see how far we get. Okay.
Let's do it.
Okay. So in the picture here, you see a bird coming down from the sky and a polar bear on his ice floe looking up, saying that we actually, when we started writing this story, we were, well, one, I could see you never get out. The story has layers before you even get started. That I have obviously been fencing bear at prayer for a very long time now, 15 years in the blog world. I have my little doll white bear in her fencing costume that I got in 2005 at a fencing tournament in Sacramento. I remember this adoption well because I had a very bad tournament. And when I bought the doll, the stuffed toy, I was saying, I'm going to be a fencer. I'd only been fencing for 2 years. And I was like, I'm going to be a fencer. I put my name on the back. We have our names on our fencing lames because that identifies us as competitors when we're in our masks. And so I put the name on the toy, and she's a white polar bear. And I have been that fencing bear at prayer in bear form since 2008 when I started my blog to try to talk about the spiritual training that I was going through as a fencer. So therefore I was delighted to find that among the unauthorized community, there are bears too. Right. And we started writing Aurora Borealis back in, well, we finished Centrism Games, our very first poem, in autumn 2020, because we wrote that one in 2020. And we were a little, like we said, well, that was a pretty heavy story because it's about abortion and fame and, you know, the corruption of the world, and it's a satire. We said we'd like to write something lighter and more joyful. And the bears in Beartaria were talking about starting up their magazine, right? I think they're on episode, is it 4 now? They've published 4 volumes of the bear.
Yeah, I think it's
right.
4.
And initially I think we were just going to write some short poems, and then it, you know, got carried away and wrote a whole book worth, and we said, okay, we'll publish it as a separate book. But we were thinking of the kinds of things that the Beartaria community was dreaming of, right, at that point, saying we'd like wholesome stories for children. Right. Yes. And so some of the reason it's bears is because we were thinking in those terms. I'm obviously bear obsessed already. I mean, I'm surrounded by teddy bears and you know, fencing bears and things like that. So, but it was also because the polar animals, right, from the North and the South Pole gave us a very nice symbolic...
yeah, well, we're bear free. We have no bears here. Antarctica means no bear. So it was this really cool thing of like, you've got the Arctic, the place where the bears are, and then the Antarctic, the place where no bears are. Yeah, it worked really well.
And then the penguins are in the Antarctic, whom our bears meet. Mm-hmm. Right. There are no penguins in the North. We did actually research these animals to make sure that we were giving them the right habitat range.
Yeah.
If we have them bump in,
it's all very scientific. It's all
completely scientific. If we have them bump into, for example, seals, which way would they have to go to actually run into seals? We mapped it all out. The route has to be in the Pacific, because in the Atlantic they wouldn't run into seals. Apparently they would get to the seals on the northern part of. So they start in the Arctic and go down the Pacific, and that gave them the reason to meet the panda. See, we plotted it all out for real in natural. You know, the natural history is accurate completely, including the albatross showing up and talking to them. Okay. Is that enough prologue?
I
don't know. Well, but this was, it's like, I think this was also a lesson in I just say, how do you write good stories? Well, you ground them in in reality, and the world teaches you things that you have to know about the structure of the story that you're going to be able to tell, which was something we learned definitely. It's like your art is always imitating mimesis, right? It's imitating the world that we live in. And so what kinds of things were we imitating off of, and what kinds of things were we trying to discern mysteries from? Trying to remember all of that. We talked about we talked about the problem and the plot and the characters for months before we actually started writing the poem.
Mm. Well, I mean, I'm thinking now that you're describing it, what we've essentially done is anti-Darwinism, to put it to the theme of the stream today. But the Darwin goes out on his quest on the boat, and he's traveling around the world to make his categories of things, and he goes to the Galapagos, of course, and then he's impressed by the finches and starts to think about natural selection as the origin of species. But our bears are not on a quest for mechanical categorization of the planet. They want the adventure and to seek the joy in exploring the world and to find the light. And I think that was probably the most beautiful part of it, is that we did do a lot of naturalistic study. We wanted to make sure that we had the right species of penguins in here, and the right kind of seals. Like everything is placed properly in terms of the natural environment, only it's been mythologized. It's been mythologized in a Christian context, that you see the story in the natural world that somebody like Darwin couldn't read or wouldn't be able to read, and that the mentality of Darwinism hides from people. It's like a myth literacy that we wanted to show and share with everybody.
Yes. And that our scientific accuracy on the creatures, I was about to say we've had various reviews. There's a review that's linked on the website where it's more an interview that I did with a fellow poet, CM Mayo. She does interviews with authors, and she also writes her own poetry. But there's one like extensive negative review on Geeks Under Grace out there, and it complains about a lot of things. We return to the things that the author in Geeks Under Grace complained about. But the opening complaint was big words, right? There's things like I've got a master's. She said the equivalent of a master's in English literature, and I'm like, what's the equivalent of a master's in English literature? What you did in medieval studies, maybe? And saying I had to keep going to the dictionary for looking up words, and it slowed me down. We're like, are you kidding? How fast do you want to read? Go look up the words. And my favorite of the words that's in the book is alluropods, right? Which is seals, right? And we set it up so in the stanza, which we won't get to today because that's in Act 2, one of the bears asks the panda, how'd you get mixed up with those alluropods? And the other bear says, yeah, what were you doing with those seals? All right. So, and when I read the book, I read the story, I've read it to a number of children, like the group at St. John Cantius, but I also read it to some friends, and they gave us blurbs on the website too. They were brothers, 8 and 11 at the time when they wrote the blurbs for us. They loved it, right? It's like kids love naming things. And you could say, yes. Darwin, unfortunately, he's tapping into the desire for taxonomy of like just naming, right? Structured names. Like people delight in. Adam did that, right? Adam does that. God brings him all the animals and he names the animals. So our joy in noticing all the creatures and naming all of them, I always wonder, it's like Darwin must have been tapping into something that people did like, not just politics and power, but a sort of desire for there to be order in the world, order in creation, order in the structure of things. Yes. And he found all those finches and turtles and things like that, and
yeah, well, we need order. We're doing that in poetry when we're creating ordered language. Yeah. So that makes sense.
We can continue to tease them for another hour and not read. I'll read now.
Okay.
Mom, start the story. No. The light was named in time before the spark, and yet it had no glass through which to shine. It seemed with joy to laugh into the dark, where air is thin and sky is crystalline. Bear-Ulfilas peered at it from his bark, the world above refracting celestine, like smoke that trailed into the dark abyss to breach the ceiling of the world he wished. Wow, we packed in a lot there. One, we should tell you, you will notice that there are 8 lines in each stanza, and that the rhyme is spark, dark, shine, crystalline. Wait, spark, dark, bark, shine, crystalline, celestine, then abyss and wished. So it's A, B, A, B, A, B, C, C. Do you remember writing in the stanza form?
I was just thinking, oh wow, that used to happen.
We've been writing in a different stanza form in Draco Alchemicus now for a while, so yeah.
Like, what happened to A, B, A, B, B, C, B,
Yeah.
C, C? Yeah. So, wait, what's that one?
Otova Rima. 8 rhyme.
Oh, thanks.
And we chose it. Do you remember why we chose it?
I don't want to be
okay, that's fine. So we chose it. No, we chose it because we'd written Centrism games in heroic couplets, which are simply iambic. All of this is iambic pentameter, right? We do nothing but the Dragon Kamaroom to this day does nothing but iambic. Oh no, we've actually done practice stanzas and other things, but the longer poems we've written, they're in iambic pentameter, which is a good thing for storytelling. In Centrism games, they're heroic couplets, which means they're paired couplets. They rhyme in pairs, which is what Alexander Pope used in his Dunciad, and it's just pairs of rhymes, right? And a little learning is a dangerous thing. Drink deeper, taste not the Pyrean spring. The most famous couplet that Alexander Pope wrote, right? So they're pairs like that. For Aurora Borealis, we said, well, we'll practice a different stanza for him. And we picked this one because it was used for the epics Orlando Furioso in Italian and Don Juan by Byron in English. And they're sort of adventure-y. It's a good stanza form for adventure tales.
Swashbuckling.
Yeah, it's what. So we got swashbuckling bears. And they buckle swashes. They definitely do. Yes, they're swashbuckling bears. Okay, so that's the stanza form. Should I read the stanza again? Because it's like I'm reading it. I'm so like writing these stanzas becomes so it's like the sound in your mouth has this flavor and shape and texture. It's so sensory to be able to get the rhymes and the meter to work together, and then embedded in all of that the symbolism and story that we're pointing to.
It's like magic.
It is. The light was named in time before the spark, when yet it had no glass through which to shine. It seemed with joy to laugh into the dark, where air is thin and sky is crystalline. Bear-Ulfilas peered at it from his bark, the world above refracting celestine, like smoke that trailed into the dark abyss to breach the ceiling of the world he wished.
Very powerful word pictures that only poetry could make that happen. Each line, it's like picture. The next line, picture. It's a very powerful way of activating the imagination. There's no other form that can do it in the same way. Yeah.
Well, I'm recognizing piece. So people, until the 19th century, when the novel became the great fictional form, longer stories were written in verse, and things like I said, Don Juan. It's like we really need to read Don Juan, because of course that was what inspired the character in the Johnny Depp movie. Was it Don Juan de Bosco? Whatever, he decides to become the world's greatest lover because he read the poem, right? And when Byron published that, it was like the sensation, right? Everybody wanted to read it. And I think what people did, now we do private silent reading. You read your novel and you keep the cover covered so that nobody realizes you're reading 50 Shades of Grey or something. The novels have taken on this very private reading. Although I guess now it's like my family, it's like my husband and do long driving trips. We put a audiobook on, right? So you're sharing the story together in the audiobook. That poetry really requires this. You need to read it out loud to get that full enjoyment of it. And I think it has to be read out loud to get a lot of the activation of the imagery, because otherwise you're not gonna hear it. It's not gonna work. What I said in my introduction to writing Christian poetry is it's like it's movies.
Yes.
Early Christian literature is basically all iambic pentameter. Well, it's hexameters. Is it a hexameters or iambic pentameter? It's in Latin. It's Latin retellings of the Gospels, and the Gospels are stories. The earliest Christian literature is retellings of the Scriptures in poetry. The great teaching text of if you all in homeschooling context want to do the liberal arts, you probably at some point come across the mention of Martianus Capella. Martianus Capella is a prosometrum. It's both poetry and prose. And it was the text that was used as the basis for training in the liberal arts, in grammar, rhetoric, logic, music, astronomy, arithmetic, geometry, music, astronomy, for that throughout the early Middle Ages. And interestingly, they wrote them in poetry because it's figuring that the poetry could carry this unlocking of meaning better than prose could. And that's contrary to what most people think now. It's like a scientific text written in rhyme. Why would you do that? There's grammars from the High Middle Ages that are written in rhyme because, again, it was considered that if you really want to understand something, verse is the way that it's going to stick in your understanding.
Yeah, hearing it, the sound, it's a very powerful activation of the imagination, but the mind works better in verse. Like as you're reading, I just kind of I can feel the gear change. It's lovely.
I'm gonna read it another time. We got it. What's funny is that we are in a very oral culture now because of live streams. I mean, how many people complain that they don't read anymore, right? It's like, oh, is it you got it in an audiobook? And I'm like, and I do enjoy audiobooks.
Hopefully.
We do need, so maybe before we get Mel Gibson to make this into a full-length animated movie, we'll get the audio version. We do have friends that have offered. Maybe we should figure out how to release that properly. That it's activating in the same way that the musical score with the story does in a movie. And the example I gave was Star Wars, because of course we're thinking about all these star imagery and associations and harmonies that we're playing with in all of our stories. We always end up with light and stars and celestial and terrestrial combinations. That the thing that you experience in a movie with all of your senses being activated is there in listening to poetry. Certainly poetry that we're putting pictures with. I'm gonna read it another time, and then we're gonna tell them what the stanza means, or some of it, right?
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good.
The light was named in time before the spark, when yet it had no glass through which to shine. It seemed with joy to laugh into the dark, where air is thin and sky is crystalline. Bear Ulfilas peered at it from his bark, the world above refracting Celestine, like smoke that trailed into the dark abyss, to breach the ceiling of the world he wished.
I just went on a little holiday. Should we talk about what it actually means? Okay. The first line, the light was named in time before the spark, that is a description of God the Logos, God the light. That the Logos, who was with God and who is God, was named in time before the spark, meaning before God had said, "Let there be light," in a created time of the first week of creation, before "Let there be light," Logos was laughing. Logos was there. So the light was named in time before the spark, meaning God had already named his son, his Logos. That, yeah. So one line has an enormous amount.
That's pretty cool.
It is cool.
It's basically both John 1:1 and Genesis. In the beginning was the Word. In the beginning God created.
Yeah.
So the light was named in time before the spark, when yet it had no glass through which to shine.
No glass. So many things. So of course we were thinking about the firmament of the world. The scriptures, in the beginning in Genesis, it said that God creates the firmament, divides the water from the waters, and we're thinking of this celestial glass that's sort of the medium for the shining of the lights of the stars and the shining of the lights of the heavens. And so we pull in all of that Genesis imagery, but I mean, glass again, it's glass didn't exist then. Glass is an artificial thing. It's man-made, so it's sort of like,
well, I'd forgotten that
it's a bit of a confusing thing.
Well, I was thinking. So what's funny is I didn't remember us thinking about it as the firmament, although that would make sense, because in the medieval cosmology, or the Ptolemaic medieval cosmology, right, the ancient, when everybody says the medievals, like, they didn't know stuff. It's like, yeah, because they're using the science from the Greeks. So if you're gonna get upset with them,
you blame the Greeks.
That they're imagining the celestial spheres as crystalline, right? And that there's no firmament. Yes, that is the division between the waters above and the waters below, and things like that. I was thinking it was before the incarnation, because one of the ways that Mary is understood in the medieval imagery is as a crystal that the light shines through to come into the world. And so this is, we're starting with the incarnation, the reality of the Logos before creation, but also before the incarnation, and that what the animals are going to find in the story is, what it's like to see the incarnate light. We were told in so it was the friend who got the review for Geeks Under Grace thought that they would actually like it, because this is a Christian story, and unfortunately the person they gave it to hasn't read Dante. Or something, right? Clearly has not read the medieval descriptions of what the incarnation means. And and certainly not the medieval poems that are describing Mary as the crystal that is, the light shines through without breaking it. So it's a metaphor for her perpetual virginity. But this, it has no glass through which to shine. So this is the light's there before time and before the incarnation. It seemed with joy to laugh into the dark, where air is thin and sky is crystalline. I think you were saying with the joy there and the big, we're bringing you down into the play of where Ulfilas is. He's in the northern hemisphere, and he's looking at the aurora, right? And that we did a lot of research in our settings as well, and looking at the aurora and the way it plays in the sky at night. Apparently, it also makes noise, which we've learned since that fit with things that we put in the story, but that it's that the aurora is very the joy of the light as it's playing against the night sky.
Well, it's the visual and the sonic of the electromagnetic. Light laughing sounds really strange, but they did this experiment in water a while ago. They show that you can actually make light from putting sound through a bubble underwater, and it goes bah! This is this massive explosion. So we were thinking, this kind of electromagnetic thing. You see it, you also hear it. That kind of mixture of experience.
Right, and that we're doing
laughing into the dark. It was like,
that the story is from one pole to the other, right? So it's like the whole magnetic reality of the planet.
Yeah.
Although as one of our friends has said, it's a flat Earth kid for stories. Well, it's a flat Earth story for kids because we have a map at the end where you're going to see like where the route was, and it's projected as it were onto a flat Earth map. But somewhat of the joke was it's also projected onto a medieval mappa mundi. And the poles are different from the North and the South Pole, right? It's from the center to the periphery. So it's from the North Pole to the perimeter of what it looks like if you project Antarctica around from the outside, right? Which to me then looked like a medieval mappa mundi with Jerusalem at the center and paradise on the edge. Right? So it's like which map projection are you imagining this journey on? Well, some of it is it's a polar story from the polar bear from one pole to the other, but it's also this journey from the center to the edge.
Yeah, we wanted to take them over the edge. The great adventure.
It's great. Okay, Bear Ulfilas. Who's that? Who's our Ulfilas?
Ulfilas.
You know how hard it was to scan these lines with Ulfilas as your main character? What were we thinking? But this is the lesson for writing poetry. When you pick your names, be sure that you're going to have to fit them in the meter. Oh my gosh.
That was horrible.
I think the panda was harder. The panda name is, so we never figured out quite how to scan that one. How many syllables it had. Okay, well, why Ulfilas? Who's Ulfilas? I'm not quizzing you. I'm just, if you do remember, you tell, and if you don't, just...
Oh, no, I remember. No, I remember because I was like, this is amazing. So
I don't remember everything. I was like, it took us months to write all of this. So
yeah,
it's like there's layers of hopefully stuff we've forgotten, and also then we'll recover and discover. And if we did it right, the art will show us new things in the world that we hadn't previously anticipated. But anyway, this one we kind of worked on.
Yeah, this we definitely did. But the meditation at the time was on light incarnating. What it actually means for the light of for Christ to be the light of the world. Well, it's the light that's incarnate. So it's that named in time before the spark light that becomes incarnate in the world. So we're thinking about this. So I was like, okay, I'm meditating on the Goths, always meditating on the Goths. The Goths who didn't believe in the incarnation of the light. They believe in a different kind of Christian understanding. And then I'm going around the map, looking at the map of Antarctica, you know, all the different territories that different countries have claimed, and Australia's got its Australian Antarctic territories or whatever. And you see some islands. Oh, it's cute. Let's have a look here. I see an island. It's Old Phyllis Island, and I thought, okay, I've got to Google this. Let me have a look. Let me have a look up. Ulfilas. He was a Gothic king. No, he was a translator.
He's a translator.
Right? He was a translator.
I'd forgotten that about the island.
Yes. So in the old days, a Gothic translator who's the first Christian to translate the scriptures into Gothic.
Right.
And his name was Ulfilas. And there's an island down in Antarctica called Ulfilas Island. So I was like, that's it. That's perfect. We've got a goth bear now.
but and this matters for his character.
Yes.
He doesn't have the same understanding of Christ as some others. Because he's actually he's actually Aryan.
Yes.
Which means
it means that he doesn't believe that the light can incarnate.
Right.
Yeah. He doesn't believe the light is God.
Well, he doesn't believe the incarnation is God. He doesn't believe
yes.
and therefore this is so he's sitting there wanting to touch it, right? Peered at it from his bark. Fancy word for boat. But he's on an ice floe right now, so he's just looking up at the sky. And the world above refracting Celestine is the play of the aurora. And it does look sort of smoky, right, trailing into the abyss, and he wants to grab it. So he's there as this goth bear, and to understand that the Goths are Aryan, which means they're the early tribes, the barbarian tribes, who in fact end up toppling Rome. But like the Visigoths, when they enter into the empire is Trinitarian Orthodox, and the Goths aren't. They think of themselves as Christians, so they sort of, when they sack Rome, they don't sack the churches, but they don't believe that the Son is of the same divinity as the Father. That they see him as I don't know, kind of a creature.
Yeah, they followed the teachings of Arius, who had wrestled with the question of who Christ really is and what relationship Christ has to God, which was always a really contentious issue in Egypt. Because the Egyptians were the ones that were working on all of the meditations about these kinds of issues, because of course the monks and the monastics and the whole concept of being a monk comes from Egypt. So the Egyptians are very, very concerned with the meditative Christianity, thinking about things like wandering in the desert and meditating on Christ. So this Aryan concept comes out of this idea from this person who decided that Christ couldn't be God, possibly because Christ was subject to crucifixion. So he thinks, how can God be killed? How can God die? And therefore it sort of goes forward from there. So the thinking that kind of Christianity, if you would call it Christianity, that thinking, it's spread from Egypt, and it finds its way into different places, but it found a home amongst the Goths.
Right.
And so Gothic Christianity is essentially the thought process of an Egyptian man who decided that Jesus could not be God himself.
Also becomes the source for Islam.
Yes.
they
the same thought process,
right.
same root
And
for the both ideologies.
and particularly the problem that you can't imagine that the divine would incarnate and sully itself with the you know, I mean, in the I always like the Tolkien, you know, Tolkien's description of it. It's like the entry into the story, but in the medieval understanding of the, you know, shining through Mary in the light, you have to then also understand. I mean, we think of light as energy, I suppose, particles and waves. I don't know. Hans Ethers he's figuring this all out. That light is a physical thing. It you know, exists as a creature, and you know, it works metaphorically for things like understanding, but also for this sense of what is it like for the divinity to enter into the material, and that image of the light shining through the crystal and the, you know, Christ becoming incarnate fleshly in Mary. Somehow we were having to grapple with this mystery. What is it to say God became incarnate? And so one of the things we're playing with in the poem is saying, it's what metaphor would help you understand that as a reality? And we're going to take the bears on a journey to do that.
Yeah.
And what layers of reality is Ulfilas going to have to encounter to get to the point where he can at least consider it as a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, it was a cool point, because we're in the story, Ulfilas is going to consider it, but doing it in a way which I did. It wasn't like a, you know, coming to understanding of incarnation through debates with people that are you know, the incarnate camp versus the Arian disincarnate Gothic Christians. You know, it's like this story was about Christianity through what we would call a liturgy. I think it's like the bears are going on a great liturgy across the world, almost. Yeah.
Yes, and that they have to go through the liturgy to get to the point where they understand the incarnation. They don't get it any other way. That it's a liturgical mystery that they're going to participate in.
Yeah.
And so that we are having the singing, the joy and the laughing happening at the opening of the light that is playing in the heavens, that they are going to get to participate in that, and that's going to be their joy. Okay, let's do another stanza. We have 15 more minutes.
Okay.
And I'm also recognizing those of you who were able, that Unauthorized has been having some difficulties tonight, and I think Vox had some difficulty. His meme stream seemed to have gotten interrupted. Luckily, we're recording this as well. So hopefully, I'm hoping everyone's still in. Yeah, there's some people watching in Telegram, but anyway, the stalwart.
Fingers
crossed. Yes, no, I'm still recording, so that's all right. Okay.
Okay.
He'd open heaven's curtain with his fist. He's talking about Ulfilas. He's like, he's going to rend heaven, right? He's going to figure out all of these mysteries. Proper goth. With his wide paw, he dragged the air to rend like foggy breath within his palm, a mist. Aurora's fume-like webs caught in his hands. No bear can cup the northern lights, he lisped. An albatross unto the ice descends. It's Abner, whose white wings had sailed the winds to seek the world beyond the polar blinds. So we actually got started in stanza 1, and the story moves along a little more now. Okay, so he's still there playing with the light, playing with the aurora, and having that sense that he can capture it in his hand, right? He's going to his paw. He's going to grab onto the reality of the light and capture it. And this sort of, I don't know whether you can't, it's light, you can't touch it, right? But it has this quality when you see it. I had friends who described having seen the aurora. I've not seen it myself, so we were going off of the videos. Have you seen it?
Yes. No, I haven't been that far north before.
Or the south? I mean, they get, that's the thing that they find it. And that's what Abner's going to tell them.
Here,
Yeah.
no, here, you have to be in a particular place in Australia to catch it.
Okay.
But they have had very strong auroras that have been seen from Victoria, but usually you've got to go down to Tasmania, which is the island off the island, and then if you go really far south into Tasmania, you'll see it there. Yeah.
This also played into what we were doing. It's like, it's something, it's like, to be able to see it is, I mean, for most people, because most people aren't living that far at either pole, it's extraordinary, right? It's this but on the other hand, it happens regularly, I think. It's like the aurora is a normal occurrence. Yes. So there's this mystical normalcy.
Yeah. Yeah, something that seems miraculous that is actually happening every day, but most people can't see it because they're not at the poles.
Yeah.
So they're not in the position to actually experience that miraculous revelation of the Earth's fields, and only when you're in the correct position can you actually experience that, which was for us, I think, a good way of demonstrating that Christianity is exactly the same. In order to experience the light of Christ, you have to be properly orientated in order to see what everything what would appear in another way to be just nonsense, non-existent, impossible to reach,
Yeah. Very nice. The albatross.
Should I talk about him? The albatross. So, our bird's a bit mad. The albatross character in this story is named Abner, which means my father is light in Hebrew, Abnur, and he's the mystic. So he arrives on the scene and he's familiar with the birds. They know him, they think he's a bit mad. He's always talking in riddles. People don't really understand him very well, but he's the one that introduces the idea that the birds should go on the great adventure to find the southern lights by flying in and speaking in his mad way. So yeah, Abner was fun to write.
I was also, so albatrosses, we did do some research to figure out, could he have gone that far north? They do have an incredible range. And they yeah. I mean, they're enormous birds and stay very high and sort of, they have to flap a lot, right?
They're like Boeings. Yeah. They're like the Boeings of the bird world.
Yeah.
They just they reach a certain altitude and then they just start cruising and they go and go and go and go and go. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was that
huge wingspan. So we thought, yeah, he's like our long distance flight mystic. It was it's cool.
And I think it's also in what's in Coleridge's Rime the Ancient Mariner. He has to it's like if you killed the albatross, it brings horrible luck on the mariners, and so in the Ancient Mariner, he has to wear the albatross because he killed it, right? So there's that. The albatross, you need to attend to him. It's very bad luck not to. Yeah, that kind of maritime superstition, but it's like a good omen to see particular creatures or a bad omen to see particular creatures. Right. So he's like their good omen. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna go to the next. So that one, the book mainly has, well, there's enough pictures in it that everything important's illustrated that needs illustration, and I've tested the pictures regularly on small children, including toddlers, who are often very taken with. Well, when we originally published the book, it was hand drawn bear, but we're reissuing it so that it's Colleen Coggins, because she's rebranding herself with a donkey rather than a bear. She's done some beautiful Christian stories about the donkeys, and she's a wonderful storyteller with just the pictures. She's done a number of books that are literally just pictures, right? Some of her early books had no words. So the poem is working with the pictures to make you have different layers of appreciation. This is not a book just for the 12-year-olds who like Auropods. It's also intermixed with, some physical comedy for the animals.
Yes. Yeah, if you like slapstick, it's good.
Yeah. But first we have to have Abner come and be all mystical, right? Okay, so here we go.
Yeah.
The bear.
How else are you gonna get bears to move?
Well, that's some of it. It's like Ulfie is just lying there going, "Woo, cool colors," right? He's not going anywhere. He's perfectly happy to be there, saying nobody can catch this. I think that going back to the no bear can cup the northern lights, right? It's like he's satisfied at that point that this is as good as it gets, right? It's like lying there on the ice floe, looking up at the lights, and there is no deeper mystery. There it is. It's just the light play and the fumey, smoky color. But Abner tells him some other stuff.
Yes.
Okay. The bear's heart leapt to see his friend the bird, a traveler whom no land could anchor long. Through monsoon tropics he had sailed assured, while bears had learned to cast their nets along the polar North Sea in their childhood fjord. The albatross would always talk in song. In shoals of harmony his words were caught. He's odd, that bird, or so Ophelus thought. So there we said that the albatross is a distance traveler. To get from South Pole to North Pole, he has to go through the tropics, right? So he's traveled all along. Whereas the bears are simply there in the north. And they know their childhood places for fishing, but they don't know the rest of the world.
Yeah, Abner's he's like a nomad, one of those kinds of people you meet. They got lots of stories because they've been in lots of different places, and but it wasn't just he's literally traveling, because obviously you have to from north to south. We wanted Abner to be the way for the bears to access a kind of bird's eye view of everything, because the bears are terrestrial. They have to live, in this story we had a really interesting opportunity to show creatures of the air, creatures of the earth, and creatures of the sea. These categories of creatures. Again, it's like not a Darwin category thing. It's like the creation Genesis story where you have God made the creatures on the land. He makes the birds. He makes the fish. So we have these kind of categories of creatures. We have in Abner the creature that exists in the aerial. He's an airhead, but he's literally in the air. He's like sky high, and he's got his bird's eye view of everything, and he just looks odd. But of course, you would seem very odd if the only view of everything you get, or the majority of the view you're experiencing of creation, is up, looking down on everything else. So it's like the perspective is flipped with Abner. where the bears are grounded and they're in their terrestrial experience, and they've got the terrain. So Abner's been traveling all over the place, but also Abner's traveling all over the place with this this aerial vision of the whole world. So yeah, it's kind of like that, the real astronaut of the story. He sees everything from up high.
Wait, these are things I hadn't even thought about. No, it is true that we have creatures of earth, air, and sea in all of it, which matters, and but what you're describing of Abner having that totally different perspective of the world. I mean, I was mainly thinking of him as messenger. Right? We have in our Mosaic Ark mythology the dove and our pigeon, right? And the pigeon carries messages from the ship and to the ship, and the bird, therefore the bird character needed to be the one that could carry those kinds of stories.
Yes.
But as you were talking just then, I had the everybody keeps putting like GoPros or whatever on birds.
Yeah. Horrible.
Well, now we just get these drones,
most
right?
Endangered eagle alive, and put a GoPro on.
Yeah. It's like, this is what the bird sees, which is actually it's helpful, because when we now have all the drones, I mean, it's like the amount of aerial photography we get now very, very easily because of these drones.
Well, that's very unusual. In the old days, you had to hire a helicopter, or they'd get, film crew would go up in a light plane. It was very expensive.
Right.
And that's why all that aerial footage became stock footage, and it was used over and over again. Because if you had a good aerial shot of anything, it was really, really valuable. Way back before the drones were everywhere, and flying over everyone's backyard.
Yes.
Invading their privacy. Yeah.
Well, so the birds aren't real. It's like the drones are everywhere now, and instead of the birds seeing us, this is an interesting meditation. There's a photographer whose work I follow, who's in Krakow, which I think about every Sunday, because we have a painting at St. John Cantius of St. Mary's in Krakow. And the photographer in Krakow, I know it because he has dogs. And I like, he does his corgis, right? But
he's, yes.
But he also does some drone photography around the city. And so now I think, thanks to his photography, that I found out because of the dogs. So it's like, follow the animals, you'll end up with the the bird's eye view of things. I've now seen more of Krakow because he keeps doing very nice drone videos of his city. And this plaza where in the altarpiece, which you all see at the beginning of the Mosaic Ark, right, when the pan up goes up the altarpiece to the resurrection scene, that's the image I'm talking about. In that you just see that one building, the St. Mary, and St. John Cantius is in the front mending the pot for the girl. Now I realize there's a plaza around that, and there's some other buildings, and there's not very many there's not very many other tall buildings in Krakow. It's just that one, the church. And it's because you got this Abner view, but it's a drone Abner.
I was thinking how interesting cities would look like to the birds that are living in them. They're in a completely different traffic. It's like, it's aerial traffic. It's just a totally different experience. It's like when you're on a plane and you're traveling somewhere and you look out the window. I mean, human beings never had that view until how many years ago? Really, it's quite... We underestimate exactly how strange it is to be able to take a commercial flight and have that view. It's weird. So, yeah, I thought if Abner's traveling everywhere, then he's, as you're reading it, north to south and back to north again and going over the equator, and he's in a completely different world. Yeah.
Which is, I mean, it's fitting beautifully with this problem of the aurora is ordinary, but we don't see it. and his view is
Yep.
ordinary. The bird's view is ordinary for the bird, but we don't see it. Although it's so, yeah. Same with the planes. That when I went down to Phoenix for the tournament, I flew
Mm-hmm.
over parts of the country that I've driven through a lot, but I haven't, but I haven't flown that many times down to Arizona, and so I was saying, what am I seeing? I'm like lost, and I know I'm going. I
Yep.
know I'm looking at the map, and I'm just like, okay, I'm going over places that I know like really well, like I grew up in, but I don't recognize them from the air at all. It's like, wow, exactly. So yeah, so
Isn't that amazing?
yes,
You're in exactly the same point, only up, and you'd have no idea where you are.
zero, zero. Yeah. Okay, so we got it. He's odd, that bird, for sure.
Yeah.
But trilled the bird. Stars melt down south, you know, and at world's end they blaze with constant fire. For when the sun sinks under pale blue snow, the southern sky ignites like time's own pyre. Aurora strikes a chord that's deep and low, attuned with seraphim on emerald lyres, of burning crystals on the bow of rain. Lo, there was I last year upon Samhain. We get kind of mystical in some of our stanzas. I love this one.
He went full woo.
He goes total woo woo.
Should we explain this one? Wait, could you say the first line again?
Yeah, it's but trilled the bird, so he's singing. Stars melt down south, you know.
Yeah, so that's the southern sky, which does look different actually. So I mean, I've been very blessed to have an Abner's eye view of the world, because I've seen north and south and the equator and everything in between, and the northern hemisphere sky looks completely different to Australia. Northern hemisphere people, they notice it too. The sky here is different. It's like open, and the light is different. If you go to New Zealand, the light, again, it's just completely different. I had a photographer friend who was in New Zealand saying it's weird, the camera's picking up on things like I've never seen pictures coming out in this particular way. So yeah, the southern sky, it's like kind of thinking about that, the stars burning. But what's the rest of the stanza?
And at world's end they blaze with constant fire.
Yeah, that's at world's end. So that's the end of the map, the end of the mappa mundi. What happens when you've left the furthest point of the human world and you're at the edge? And then, because that medieval map is Jerusalem in the center, and then at the outside we're in paradise. So he's describing the absolute edge of the world and the stars blazing. I don't know, it got very woo-woo.
Well, sometimes, so I do think it's fair to say that sometimes we write this stuff and it just seems right.
Yep.
and I mean, but almost, you know, if this is what's interesting about writing the poetry, if not every time, right? It's not just because you get the rhyme and the meter right, therefore it's meaningful. But sometimes we do just write it to get those things right. It's like it scans and it rhymes, and then we're like, is that right?
Yeah.
So
we're gonna fix it.
Yeah, it's like, because but I mean, it's interesting sometimes when you try to cram the sense in, it breaks. And so if we go with the music of the sounds and the beat, it comes out right, even though we may not always completely know what it means at the start. But so I'm thinking, it's like, I don't know if we meant this, but the blazing with constant fire, I'm also thinking now we've described the crystalline sky, which is like the fixed stars of the Ptolemaic firmament, and they're just all, I mean, you know, we think about it, it's like they're always there, you don't see them because the sun's overwhelming them in the daytime. But the idea of the fixed stars is, yes, they actually are blazing constantly. And so when the sun sinks under the pale blue snow, so when it's night, this blazing reality of the light is visible. It's like throughout this opening, we're playing with this. It's always there, but you don't always attend to it. That the mystical is not seeing something that is only blinking in and out and it's only there when you're watching it. It's like it's absolutely always there, but it's your attention that is what you have to train.
The stars playing peekaboo. Yeah.
But they're always there, blazing with this constant fire. The southern sky ignites like time's own pyre. I do remember that we very purposefully wrote that line.
Yes.
that time, so light and time play out in this a lot, so that all of the celestial imagery has to do with clocks, right? We're going to end up, we have the puzzle we mentioned that we made, the video on the website that shows it being put together is called Sky Clock, because we're thinking about the stars as marking time. And of course, that's the way human beings understand time from antiquity, is of the movement of the heavens. We know time. We know time because of watching the clock in the sky.
Yeah, the celestial is our concept of time wherever we are, and it's also you're navigating time with the stars the same way you're navigating space with them if you're a voyager on the seas. So they're our reference point for everything.
Aurora strikes a chord that's deep and low, tuned with seraphim on emerald lyres, burning crystals on the bow of rain.
Singing rainbows.
There's a rainbow. Yeah, so the rainbow imagery is quite powerful in all of this. So aurora is, in fact, the aurora borealis, the aurora borealis of the north and the aurora australis of the south. That light, the aurora, is the light display or dawn. And I mean, for me, it's impossible for me to write any of these creatures without remembering how in the medieval descriptions of the symbolism, it's always Mary at some point. So the aurora is for me a phrase from the Song of Songs where Aurora Consurgens, she's the rising dawn. It's reference to the bride of Christ, the bride of the bridegroom in the poem, but also that Mary is described as that rising dawn. So and then aurora in the ancient epics will be often the character, like if you read it, the Iliad, or is it in the Aeneid? I can't remember. The rosy fingered dawn, right, is always one of the so you've got that light, and it's saying it's aurora is there at the level of the mythical, to say there's this light display. The chord, I mean, like saying that there's the seraphim are the angels that sing, and the chord that's there, playing on their emerald lyres, playing on that light display again, that's all this green, that is music. And I don't think we knew this when we were writing it, but it does make music. We didn't know that. It makes like something that sounds like whale song, which is also topical for the poem.
Yeah, which we didn't know at all.
Which we didn't know at all.
No idea. Yeah. No idea. Yeah.
This happened a lot as we were writing it. It's like sometimes we'd be looking at, phenomena and saying, okay, that's part of our mystery, we put that in, and then later on find out that indeed it was more of it than we appreciated. So there's time comes into it, the heavenly display, the song, and then the crystals on the rainbow, right? So that all of this light display in the heavens. And here Abner has been there and he's seen it. And I was there last on Samhain, which is playing off of, again, the mythical that's playing out here. Samhain properly is All Hallows Eve. It's the eve before the Feast of All Saints. So and the saints,
Halloween.
Yes, it's Halloween in the Celtic naming of it. But he's there at the beginning of the end of the liturgical year.
He's there at the time when the veil between the worlds is thin, and having that kind of experience too, which is like very appropriate for Abner, because he's moving between poles, so obviously he's going to be down there between worlds at some point. Yeah.
So I think I kind of want to just stop because we've done our time, but on the other hand, want to tease them a little bit to read this next one, just to give a taste of a character of what goes on. I knew it, cried the bear. The earth is flat, which isn't necessarily a sequitur from what Ulfi just said. It's like the bear is assuming that he knows everything. Based on this mystical description that the albatross just gave him, which it's like, what? I wish I had an airship to take wing, which fits with our meditation on the drones and everything. Right? It's like, how would a terrestrial creature get there? Right? I'd fly up to the moon for real. Don't laugh. To where the lights of time begin to sing. Which, to be fair, is what Abner's just described. But Ulfi's, immediate response is wanting to get into it somehow. It's like, but needing what a ship, or piercing into the mysteries, going to the moon and such. At which Abner says, "You'd never make it there and back. You're fat." You don't know north from south or what to bring. Your mother told you stories of the light, but you were busy getting into fights.
I'm trolling.
Which we will give you. It's like here's what's a picture. This is what happens in the next stanzas. Right. Yes. That Abner he wants to excite Ulfi to quite literally get off his butt. And how would you do that, right? Ulfi is there as we do. I mean, I think there's a spiritual lesson here, because so Abner shows up and says, I've been on this journey. I've seen these mysteries. I've participated in this mystical rending of the veil between the earthly and the heavenly. And Ulfi his first response is, if I had a machine, I'd get there, right? So people, it's like, you want mechanisms that will make it easier. And I'd get straight up to the moon, right? It's like, we didn't even talk about the moon, right? We've been talking about something that's within the terrestrial, and he's going to go even further than Abner has, because Abner's not doing anything above the moon. And Abner quite rightly says, you'd never make it. You haven't done anything. You're just lying there.
Yeah.
I'm working on a little foreword for a book that I've been asked to comment on about prayer, and thinking, it's like, one of the problems with prayer is always, it's like the first thing people think is, oh great, it's like a wizardry thing, right? I'm gonna find the right words and magically transport myself into ecstasy, abracadabra, right? And I'll get there. I knew it all along. I'm gonna get there. I've got this mechanism. I take off, in my airship and get to the moon. You're just
Well, I thought it was funny because Abner basically calls him a blimp after he says he wants an airship. So it's like,
yes. You're not gonna float. You can't. You're too heavy, right? So he wants to be a ship in the air, and he's very much earthbound. or sea bound. It's like, yeah,
Yes.
he's earthbound, and that being then, I mean, we obviously we want Ulfi to succeed in this quest, because otherwise there's
Yes.
no story. But there is that, I think, I think it's accurate to say that, often you show people these mysteries, or they're described in the scriptures of the angels singing in heaven in Revelation, or in the visions that Isaiah describes of the seraphim around the throne. And our immediate response is, how do can I buy it? Can I make some mechanism for getting this?
It's acquisitional mentality. It's like collections, like taxonomy of things that you can collect, and then say, I want that one, so how do I get it? I want that experience, how do I get it? Which is a very modern thing. I mean, that's modernity, really. Like, I want that, so I'll just go and get it. And if that person, it's like it's not an experiential thing, and there's also no wonder in it.
Right.
Abner is saying, like, could you imagine telling somebody you've just had that experience, and then their first response is, oh, I can get that too.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's like, instead of having the awe, like, wow, that sounds amazing. What is going on down there? Tell me more about this sky in the south. Tell me more about this. Oh, I can do that too. It's competition. Like, again, we go back to that Darwinism thing, but it's the instant thing of, like, I have to compete with this. I want to get it to that person has something, back into that thing. Where Abner he's like, no, I'm explaining. There's a place where you've got to go and you got to see it for yourself, but you're in your current form.
Right.
It's not happening. So yeah, there's cute tension there. There's cute tension there between those two characters, and thankfully Ulfilas does decide to go on an adventure.
Well, he jumps up to try to bite Abner in the butt and falls in the water.
Yes.
That happens in the next stanzas, and I'm tired now. No, it's like, this was great, right? I don't think we haven't talked. We wrote this in 2021. All right, so 2 years ago, and it's actually, I mean, this is really good. I think we've been away from it long enough to find things in it that we didn't realize that we put there, or to forgotten things that we did purposely put in there. But I think there's also what we had to learn in writing, and this is, I think, one of the things that we probably want to unpack in the, how do you teach people to pay attention at this level? Obviously, it's my job at the university, but even in our university teaching, everybody complains we don't go slow enough. I mean, it's like I assign, I mean, it's like a historian, I assign hundreds of pages to get the students to read. And sometimes I do just want to say, let's just read this paragraph and see what we find in it. I did a poetry reading with Zach Log and his friend Nate on Sunday, which on Chesterton's The Donkey, which you guys can see on Zach Log's YouTube. And Zach Log memorizes poems and performs them for his videos, but he also does these conversations where you just one poem and read it and talk about it and really unpack it. Say this kind of appreciation of word and craft and story. My sense is that's what people are really longing for and missing. I'd say, we enjoy it when we do it with movies, right? I'm going to really unpack the story and go through all the imagery and characters and things like that. We could do that with others, our other literature, but we just don't right now, and we can. And we can learn to read again.
Oh
We can
yeah.
learn to read again with this like love for the vocabulary and the craft that it takes to tell a story well. And I do think I'm not completely despairing of modernity, right? I do think storytelling is happening at that level in other media. I think sometimes it's happening in the movies for sure. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is very good. I'd like to talk about
Hmm.
that one. Um, but just to be able to slow down and really enjoy in the proper like deep sense of enjoy the way our art works
Mm.
is something we miss a lot in education right now.
We're missing it from everything.
I think back in the 19th
Just to,
century, people had it partly because they were learning Latin and Greek, and you had to do it slow because you couldn't read it. So the
hmm.
complaint that the reviewer for Geeks Under Grace made is that it's the hard words that you have to look up and it slows people down. I have done a little reading to understand now, like, oh, it's this horrible thing. You'll make kids feel like they're inadequate if they can't read every word and they don't already know all the words. It's like, then how do you learn anything? How do you ever find
Yeah.
knowledge if you're only bound by, in your flat earth boundedness, the world you already know? There'll be never any mystery that you've encountered. But that it did just occur to me that I did do Latin in high school, and to read Aeneid, to read Virgil, our teacher was very good. He made us sit down with each line and unpack. You'd have to unpack it grammatically and unpack with the figures of imagery that Virgil was doing with his language and metaphors and things like that.
Mm.
And it was slow going, but when you read slowly like that, you really remember it. It gets into you, and you can live with it for the rest of your life. And two, it opens out at all of these levels that you're never going to get if you are just speeding it.
Well, it's gaming with language instead of using language as a status tool, a
Mm.
status symbol. Because the only reason why a kid would read like that and say, "Oh, it's too hard for me. It makes me feel stupid," is if you're teaching kids that they should be ashamed to not know, instead of like the whole process of reading is a game. It's you,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if you're reading to your children, if you're reading to young people, and you're playing as you're reading, you show them that it's a game to explore and experience the language instead of being embarrassed because they don't know how to say something or they don't understand a particular word or whatever. If you're the kind of person that likes to read, that likes to learn foreign languages, you have this experience over and over
Mm.
again because you get reset into being a baby every time you go into a new language. And then people are laughing at you all the time, "Oh, you sound so cute. Oh, what did you say?" You say the wrong word, it means a completely different thing. It's all very embarrassing. But yeah, I don't know why wouldn't you want uh that joy of finding something new as you're in a story. It seems to me like it's just the fear of looking stupid is stopping everyone from having fun. Like why?
Well, precisely
Yeah.
because, and I think this that in the Secret Life of Words book, he mentioned someplace about when status becomes this word that, like, it
Uh-huh.
is in the 19th century. That, and we talked about this last week with the what women want. Like my saying, I want men with
Mm-hmm.
skills. That
Yep.
true status comes with high skill, and the sort of the dumbing down and restricted vocabulary lists and things like that is trying to short circuit the game, right? It's like Ulfi wanting the airship to get to the moon,
Mm.
right? I want this mechanism that will short circuit the whole process, which they're going to have to go on the journey in the story to get to those lights that Abner just described for him. He can't just jump in a ship and get there. He can't just get on the plane
Yep.
and not take the journey and they go on a boat, right? So, not take the journey through the water, which in the creation story, which we started with, it's like the firmament is the division between the waters of the heavens and the waters of the oceans. So if you want to get to the firmament, you have to go in the actual water.
Yep.
And that in the 19th century with the empire that we were talking about, they're training all of those, Brits in the public schools in classics, and that they go off and become the officers of the empire, having read their Homer and Virgil. I mean, it is interesting. It trains character to have to work through language this slowly. Your soul is trained by having to work through these verses. And then the bear bites the bird on the butt. Well, that's an opening demonstration of what we hope you can do with this story, and I think we should keep continuing to read it, but it will take us. It's like there's the Tolkien professor Corey, I'm blanking on his last name, does these slow readings of Tolkien stories, and Tolkien was trained in these language studies. He gets what it takes to craft at this level, and that's why you love the Lord of the Rings, because it's crafted at this level of every word counts, and you can do this close reading with it. And I think maybe you only get that with authors who've truly been trained in unpacking language out of this level of precision. Maybe we should read more James Joyce. That'll probably work too. Okay, well, there's nobody to say goodbye to. Oh no, there's a few viewers in the Telegram, and everybody on unauthorized. We thank you for your support, and hopefully next time you watch this live as we carry on in our journey on the Mosaic Ark with the bears. More bears. Okay. Good night.
Good night.